So let us all close our eyes and connect with each other and with our spiritual friends and with our Divine Master to give thanks for this new opportunity of coming together and studying about Spiritism, this philosophy of life that brings so much comfort and so much enlightenment to each one of us. So we are grateful for this opportunity and we are very happy to begin this new journey together. So for Christ, our guide, friend of all moments, we thank you for all the inspirations, for all the love and the guidance and protection that brought us to this point. Please continue to be with us today and always. Thank you. So be it.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay?
Good evening, everyone.
Hey, Camila, how are you? Good to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay, how's everybody else, guys? Let me hear. Today's the first meeting. We're very happy to have you all join us. Let's hear from how folks are doing before we get started.
Can everyone mute their lines? Yep.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say that I'm so happy and so excited that today finally arrived fast start. So just very happy to be here with everyone. Um, thank you.
I was just working out the kinks here. I was getting some echo from Evena's computer. So yes, I'm very excited too, guys. I'm sure you have heard how the meeting is gonna work, but just as a quick recap, as people are joining in, we are doing a systematized study of the Spiritist doctrine, and essentially it consists of the five books. But since we already studied the Gospel according to Spiritism, actually three times a week at the center between English and Portuguese, we are going to study in this time from 7:30 to 9 p.m. every Tuesday in English the four remaining works. Okay, and I'm gonna show which ones those are here in a second. But while I pull it up, so we're doing the Spirits book, the Mediums book, the Gospel according to Spiritism, and the Genesis. Okay. Or not the Gospel according to Spiritism, Heaven and Hell, and then Genesis in that order. Okay. So every Tuesday. And we'll have one person responsible for the book, the Spirits book. There'll be Lino, and then myself, responsible for Heaven and Hell. Danny will be responsible for the Mediums book, and the Genesis. We're going to take turns in coordinating the Genesis. Okay, and then for those interested in the Gospel, go ahead.
And Pablo, just want to say thank you so much because I was supposed to be the one beginning today, but I had some issues with work and I couldn't begin. So thank you so much for beginning and
No, you're
volunteering
fine.
to.
You're fine. You're fine. Yeah, no, and people are running around too. And I'm sorry, guys, the mic was on, and we were like stressed on time because we have a desk here, and my wife was using it for work, and we're trying to switch things around. But everything worked out, so it's no big deal, Lino. So, with the exception for this month, we are going to start with Heaven and Hell. for the first week. But for the following month, we're going to do the first week of the month, the Spirits book, the second week, the Mediums book, and then the third week, Heaven and Hell, and then the fourth week, the Genesis. And then for months, which are very few in the year, that have 5 weeks, that last week we're going to study the Spiritist magazine, okay, or some other interesting articles, and give folks a chance to interact and ask questions, okay, so just so we don't lose the order.
And then we have
Pablo, I'm so sorry. So I misunderstood it. I thought you were
educate. We want freedom of speech.
instead of Lino.
We want a strong military,
There is someone speaking.
which they don't.
Yeah, I think Aisha Valente, if you can mute her, by mistake.
I wouldn't say they're too much into the Second Amendment, the world of the Second Amendment. I
It's
will-
Trump. There is Trump.
These people, they will-
Participant in our study, but
After 5 and Aisha Valente, could you mute your microphone, please?
Place religion
capability.
in government in their eyes. It has absolutely replaced.
But go ahead, Danny. We're still hearing you. That's okay.
Yeah, so I'm so sorry, I misunderstood. I've sent the information about the Spirits book beginning tonight. So I thought you were doing the Spirits book instead of Lino. So no?
Oh, no. So yeah, Lino, since I don't want to step on Lino's toes, he's going, that's his baby. He's gonna, yeah. No, it's okay. It's okay. It's good that folks we'll get the information firsthand here. So I mean, it doesn't really hurt the order of the factors here. We'll still have the same product, right? So it's just this one time. But guys, does anybody have any questions as far as how the study is gonna work, or?
I have a question about, so what are we doing today? The Spirits book or another book?
So we're doing Heaven and Hell.
Heaven and Hell. Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so and the studies will be
Next week will be the Mediums book,
correct.
and then on the third week, it's gonna be the Spirits book then this month.
Yes.
That- Okay.
And then we'll do the Genesis. Okay. Yeah, and we're working out the
Back in
kinks.
June, and then in June, we are going to do on the order.
Resume the order. So every first week, the Spirits book, and then the Mediums book, Heaven and Hell, and then Genesis. Okay. So it was just today. And again, and I'm sorry for the kinks. We're still working out the system, and we're still like establishing an order and making sure things are working. So I appreciate you guys' patience. But I see here Adriana, Georgia, Aisha, Ana, Beth, Camila, Dani, Fernanda, two Fernandas, Marcelo, a couple of other folks whose name I cannot tell. But essentially, yeah, Marcel, yeah. Any more questions or comments, guys? No?
I actually do have a comment, Pablo.
Go ahead, Dani.
Well, first of all, welcome everyone if you're joining us for the first time. And we have we're a WhatsApp group. If you'd like to receive information, I have been informed of all the activities of the Spiritist Society of Chicago. Let us know here on the message, and we will send you the information of how you can join the WhatsApp group. We are also on Instagram and on Facebook, so hopefully if you are not already join part of one, following us on social media or being part of the WhatsApp, let us know so we can add you and you can be informed. Thank you, Pablo.
All right. With that said, let me share my screen, guys. Hope everyone's staying sane here with the pandemic, place shelter, stay at home shelter. Okay. Let's see here. Stay at home order. Let me share my screen. Okay. Okay. All right. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. I wanted to get the slideshow.
Hey, Pablo, if you exit the slideshow, oh, there you go.
There it goes. Yeah, that's what I was trying to do. And again, guys, this won't be every meeting thing. Just as I said 5 minutes ago, as we get the end of things. That's okay. So pretty much recapping, we're going to do a systematized study, and essentially, at least for heaven and hell, we're going to study from cover to cover, and I believe the other works too. We're each going to have a different style, but that's the target that we're trying to achieve. And I just did a couple of slides to explain the study, right? I'm learning tricks here with the PowerPoint. But a quick recap, I believe most of us are familiar with the works, the basic works of the Spiritist codification, which is made up by these 5 books here, right? So the Spirits book, which was published in 1857, the Mediums book, which we're also studying, right, which was the second one published. This was in 1861, followed by the Gospel According to Spiritism. That's the one that we have a weekly study of on Saturday mornings in English. And that was published in 1864. And the work we'll be studying today, starting today, which is Heaven and Hell. And that was published in, does anybody know this one? 1865, right? In August of 1865. So this upcoming August, it'll be its 155th birthday. And then lastly, but not least, Genesis, which was published in January of 1868, okay? And starting in 1858 to 1869, if memory serves me right, Kardec published the Spiritist magazine as well, which we'll be reading some articles from that during the months that have 5 weeks, okay? And a lot of the messages that we're going to see throughout the codifications, the codification first appeared in the Spiritist magazine, so it should be interesting to study that. And then with the Spirits book, so I'm not talking a lot, can anybody tell us, how it's divided? Lino, since you're going to be coordinating the Spirits book study?
Yeah, sure. It's divided in 4 parts. Each part was then further expanded in one of the other books. So the first part is about.
Mm-hmm. If you,
I'm pulling here my memory, God.
yeah, good, perfect. Yeah,
And,
like you're saying, the first part is about God and primary causes. But essentially,
exactly.
what I wanted to touch base with you guys was that you knew that the Spirits book was divided in 4 parts, right? And as Lena was saying, each one was later developed, and the subject matter of the respective parts was made into a whole another book, right? So the first part of the Spirits book of about God and the primary causes, that was studied with more depth in the book of Genesis, right? And then the second part, the spiritual world, that was studied further in the Mediums book. The third part, the moral laws, that was the interest of the gospel according to Spiritism, right? And the last part, which is of hopes and consolations, that was further studied in Heaven and Hell. Okay, so Kardec, the teacher that he was, he had this methodology, and he waited the years and the length of time it took between each work for folks to be ready, right? Because if he had come out with all of these 5 works, it would have been too soon. Probably would overwhelm people. If nowadays we still get overwhelmed, imagine back then, right? So this is the 5 books, right, of the codification. And then before we get started with heaven and hell, I just want to throw out there a couple of terms that we might read today, so we don't need to keep changing screen and going online, so we can look up the terms. Let's see here. Okay, yeah, and then just I'm going back here just so I can tell you guys why we chose to do it this way, as opposed to having just Lino or just myself or just Dunny coordinating all of these books, or opening 5 different studies for all 5 of the books, right? If we space it out where one person is solely responsible for a single work, it gives that person time, right, to sort out their own matters, personal life and work related obligations, which was why we accommodated this first time, right? But also it gives them time to really put in the work and kind of read and bring their take, right? So that they're not overwhelmed either. So we have the best of both worlds here. And at the same time, we can study all of these 5 books in a way that we don't really have, from my understanding, right now in the Spirit's movement, right? Really systematized in English. There may be a few here and there, but especially at our center, we felt it was appropriate to do this, right? So hopefully we can all learn together. And obviously I'm learning as we go too, so feel free to correct me or make any suggestions. So today we are going to be starting Heaven and Hell. And that book, guys, I want you to know, and we're going to revisit this as we go, right? And as I get better with the PowerPoint and just really more organized, and as the study really takes off, I want us to know more or less, how are the works divided? What was the intention behind the division and presentation of material? So we can really start reflecting it and not just reading, right? Because then we could just read by ourselves, right? So today, I think, at least for me, the terms that I didn't really know or appreciate, and I looked online, was nihilism, right? Which is from the word Latin, this word here, nihil, which means nothing, right? So it's the doctrine that rejects all of religious and moral principles. It's just literally the belief that life is meaningless, okay? So I want us to have this in the back of our minds. And then positivism here. Do you want to read this for us, anybody? Do we have a volunteer? Ivna?
Yes.
Go ahead, Lino.
In sociology, positivism is the view that social phenomena such as human behavior and how societies are structured ought to be studied using only the methods for the natural sciences. So positivism is a view about the appropriate methodology of social science, emphasizing empirical observation.
Right. That pretty much evaluates understanding through data, right? And good.
And that later.
Go ahead.
That later on gave rise to the logical positivism, which created natural sciences, right?
Good, you see, and was spoken from a true scientist here, guys. So no better person to read this than a scientist. Okay, so this is what I wanted to show you guys, these 2 terms, and I want to circle back here, and these are all the slides, guys. I want to circle back to. Oh, I think I froze. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Yeah. Okay. My computer froze here, so I'll just use another one, but I have it set up as a backup. But before I have to present and bring up the slides, I wanted to say that the book Heaven and Hell was divided in 2 parts, okay? And those 2 parts are essentially what composes the book. And the first part, Kardec is going to study, it's going to be entitled Doctrine, right? And there he's going to analyze different doctrines and compare them, okay? And this is going to be obvious as we start reading. That's the first part. And the first part was made of, or is made of, 11 chapters, okay? And there we're going to understand, the doctrine of nothingness. So he's going to talk about pantheism, and obviously, Spiritism. He's going to talk about angels and demons, the church's views on those topics, right? And contrast them to Spiritism. So that's really the first part, right? Doctrines, 11 chapters. And then the second part, composed of 8 chapters, then he's really going to set forth examples, right? That's the title of the second part, examples. And there he's going to stratify spirits in different categories and bring them to life, right? So they came through different mediums, and he chose the ones that he thought would be most useful, right, for what he was trying to convey in the first part. So there he's going to have, happy spirits, average spirits, suffering spirits, and we're going to study those together as well, okay? Any questions so far, guys? All right, I'm just going to get the other computer real quick while this one restarts. So 1 second.
I have a question. Pablo, should I keep my book open here? Are we going to read together, or are you going to have it on the screen?
I'm gonna pull it up. Actually, I came back, so I don't think I'm gonna need to restart here. 1 second.
Okay. So I can close my book here, right?
You can. So let me see here. Here it comes. Okay. So, okay. And guys, feel free to add extra knowledge or things that you feel like could be, useful for the group that I didn't mention, because obviously I'm learning with all of you guys as well. Okay, can everyone see what I'm seeing here? Just the front page of Heaven and Hell?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Oh. So he actually jumps straight to the first part, okay? In the Portuguese edition, the translator actually took an introduction from an earlier edition of Heaven and Hell, okay? But again, it wasn't included in the definite edition. And I thought of even showing that portion here, but for the sake of time, I'll just tell you guys that in that Spiritist magazine, that was really a series of books that he published over the years, he advertised this book, Heaven and Hell, when it was published, right? And wholeheartedly recommended folks to read it, okay? So this is the first part, Doctrine. Chapter 1, the future life and nothingness. And then this is pretty much the content. And what I wanted to do is read. Obviously, I'm not going to be talking the whole time. We're friends here. It's a discussion. We're both learning, right? I'm only facilitating here. But every now and then, I am going to bring examples from the collection of Andre Lewis, which was the spirit who psychographed to Chico, or through Chico, about the spiritual world. He has a collection of 13 books entitled "Life in the Spiritual World." Okay, so just to make things more rich and diversify the discussion. So these here are topics of the second part, entitled Examples. You see the passage, so the transition, right, of death, and then happy spirits, And this is something we seldom read. I read this book, I read all of it, but once, maybe twice. And so that's why I hopped on the opportunity, because it gives me a chance to really study, right? He talks about suicide. We see here repentant criminals, hardened spirits, earthly expiations, right? So here we are, part 1. See the prohibition against evoking the dead, right? We've seen the Old Testament as well, and the church. Also, but okay, so chapter 1. All right, I'm gonna stop talking. I want to get you guys' take on the future life and nothingness. What do we feel these terms mean to us? What do you think is going to be discussed here? And guys, before, because it's online, so it's a little bit like awkward. Sometimes we are camera shy, or we don't want to talk. So I'll call on people, but again, not to put you on the spot at all. Feel free not to say anything, or say, I don't have a comment. And if I don't hear from you, like in 5 seconds, I'll speak myself, or I'll call on someone else. But just so we can have focus participating, and I can learn from you as well. Okay.
And also remember to unmute yourselves, because you may be speaking and we may not be hearing anything. So just remember to unmute yourself.
Yeah. So, Lino, what do you think this means, my friend? The future life, and what does this mean to you? Does this mean anything to you?
I almost was tempted to begin talking without unmuting myself, just to give an example. Sure. So I think it's probably gonna go over the different aspects you can view, right? What happens after you die, right? If especially because you gave us a clue talking about nihilism just before, and the what happens after you die, and how that belief affects society and our actions and our moral code, and how we act. Because if you don't believe it, there's anything, there's a series of things that, based on positivism, logically, you can assume that, if there's nothing there, then this, and that apply. But if it is, then the logic is completely different, right?
Right. What do you think, Danny? You about
I'm sorry. I'm gonna pass.
Okay, no problem. Fernanda? Bonini?
I think we are going to discuss if there is an afterlife, or if life ends with when our body deceases. In a nutshell, I think this is it.
Okay, pretty much. Anybody else, guys? Did anybody experience or have a belief of nothingness, or a future life that's pretty much non-existent after our bodies perish, and then after knowing Spiritism somehow changed that view? Or was anybody agnostic before? Does anybody know anyone who is? And how do you see that affecting their behavior, I guess?
I will say something.
Right.
I have a friend. He's totally atheist.
Camila, just so we can know who you are too, I already know you, but folks who are watching you guys, can you just quickly introduce yourself, say where you're watching us from, or participate?
Oh, okay. So I live here in Morton Grove. I knew the society for 5 years, and
Okay, cool.
I would love to be more often in meetings, but I can go. And then I'm so happy to be here and can participate. And I'm learning English, and I'm so shy to speak in English.
That's That's good. That's good. English is good. That's how you learn. You got to speak it, right? But yeah, go ahead. You're gonna with your comment. Thanks for introducing
So
yourself.
I have a friend. He don't believe in God and
Mhm.
life after the death, and it's so hard to talk to him, and it's so hard to understand how he can live without this idea that you have a life after that. So I can believe how he can live here and be happy or be. I know, I understand him, I accept and I respect him, but it's so hard to explain him about this life and the next life after that. And I, it's very hard to understand him.
Yeah, and that's why Camille, I could say that, if you want to try to talk to somebody about spiritualism, right?
There is an echo going on, Pablo, when you speak. There's an echo going on. I don't know if there is one device feeding into another.
Check, Lena, please.
Yeah, I just muted.
Okay. So, to your point, Camila, thanks, Fernanda. Um, Somebody needs to believe in something, right? Before they take that leap into spiritism, right? Because if somebody's just plain atheist, it's very hard to discuss spiritism with them if they're not spiritual, right? And then, does anybody else have anything to say? All right. So let's, Beth, if you could you lead us starting the reading? So again, we're keeping in mind that this whole first part is going to discuss about doctrines, right? And then this first chapter here is called The Future Life and Nothingness. And that's why I wanted to see what you guys thought of it. But let's, for the sake of time, start. Beth, could you read for us, please?
Okay, let's see. We live, we think, we act, that is certain. And we die, that is no less certain. But where do we go when we leave this earth behind? What will it be like for us after death? Will we be better off or worse? Will we even exist or not? Being or non-being, such is the alternative. Forever or nevermore, all or nothing. Will we live forever or will everything end once and for all? Is it even worthwhile to think about all this? All human beings sense the need to stay alive, to enjoy life, to love, and to be happy. If dying persons are told that they will live a while longer, that their time has been delayed, or especially that they will be happier than they have ever been, their hearts rejoice. Of what use would such aspirations of happiness be, however, if it only took a puff of air to dissipate them? Has there ever been anything more disheartening than the thought of complete and utter annihilation? Our dearest affections, our intelligence and progress, the knowledge we have so laboriously acquired, everything dissolved into chaos, everything lost. So what good would it do for us to put forth any effort to make ourselves better individuals, to overcome our passions, or to exhaust ourselves trying to enlighten our mind, if we could derive no benefit from any of it, or especially if we were to succumb to the thought that perhaps all of this will be of no use in the end? If such were the case, the fate of human beings would be 100 times worse than that of wild animals, because animals live entirely for the present in order to satisfy their material appetites. They have no concern for the future. A secret intuition, however, tells us that this cannot be the case. Keep going.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you. Okay. Let me just, okay. This is okay. Can everybody see? Is this okay? Can you guys read? Is this size for everybody, or do you want it bigger?
A little bit gets better.
Yeah, this is too small for me. And I have my full screen here.
Okay. Yeah, no, feel free to tell me things, guys. All right. So far what we've read, right? Any comments here? Ivna, do you have anything to say? Nope. All right. This is very interesting because he's first setting up, um, you know, the effects of believing in nothing, right? Believing there's nothing in a future life, right? And he is highlighting uh, that, right, which is hopelessness, desperation, by by making a supposition that if somebody was dying, if you told them, you had a little more to live, you have a little longer, they will be happy. They will be happier. They will be hopeful, right? But if they to believe that, after there will be nothing, then, it only took a air to dissipate them. Then the question will be, everything was dissolved, everything that I learned, was my life meaningful? That's why I highlighted some portions here, right? Everything dissolved into chaos, everything lost. What good would it do for us to put forth any effort, right? So the first point we're learning here is that not believing there's a continuation of, life after death takes out the incentive for us to put any effort forth. And what type of effort is he talking about? The effort of becoming better individuals, right? Of dominating and overcoming our passions. And if that was the case, then we would be worse than that of animals, right? Because animals could care for nothing. They don't have a concept of immortality. And all they care about is to sleep, to feed, and to reproduce, right? And they in a way fulfill all their needs, right? And yeah, and us, that's not the case, right? So, and then he's saying a secret intonation that this cannot be the case. And I have a couple of stories to share with you guys too, but we'll do that in a little bit. Let's keep going here. Go ahead, Beth, if you want to be our reader for a couple more pages.
Okay. When humans believe in nothingness, they overwhelmingly concentrate all their thoughts on their present life, and there is no real reason for them to worry about a future that they do not expect to arrive. This exclusive preoccupation with the present leads them to think of their own selves more than anything else. It is therefore a most powerful stimulus for selfishness, and disbelievers are being consistent when they reach the following conclusion: let us enjoy ourselves while we are here. Let us enjoy ourselves as much as possible because we know that after death it will all end. Let us enjoy ourselves right now, for we do not know how much longer our lives will last. This way of thinking leads them to another assumption that is even more consequential for society. Let us enjoy ourselves in any way we can. Every man for himself, as they say. Happiness in this world is for those who are the cleverest. If human respect restrains some persons, what will restrain those who fear nothing? They believe that human laws only apply to those inept enough to get caught, and so they apply all their ingenuity to the best means for evading them. If there is an insensitive and antisocial doctrine, it is surely nihilism, for it breaks the true bonds of solidarity and fraternity upon which all social relationships are based. Let us imagine what, okay. No. Let us imagine that for some reason an entire nation of people are convinced that in 8 days, in 1 month, even in 1 year, they will be wiped out, that not one trace of any individual will remain. What will they do while awaiting extermination? Will they work for their progress or education? Will they make an effort to survive? Will they respect the rights, property, and life of their fellow citizens? Will they submit to any law or authority, no matter how legitimate it may be, that of their parents, for example? Will they sense any kind of duty? Of course not. Well then, that which could not possibly happen collectively is nonetheless accomplished by nihilism each and every day on an individual basis. If the consequences are not as disastrous as they could be, It is because that, in the first place, for the majority of disbelievers, there is more boastfulness than true disbelief, more doubt than conviction. They are more afraid of nothingness than they let on to be. Being known as daring individuals stokes their vanity. In the second place, it is because die-hard disbelievers are by far in the minority. In spite of themselves, they feel the weight of contrary opinion and are restrained by social forces. Nevertheless, if absolute disbelief were to gain the majority, society would devolve into chaos. That is what propagating the doctrine of nihilism would lead to.
Period. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, right? Let me just scroll back again. I see usuário here. I'm not sure who this is, but do you want to make a comment or introduce yourself? Okay. Anybody has any take on what we've read so far, on what's highlighted, and why you're thinking? Go ahead.
I was just going to point out the timing period, right, where nihilism was like on its heyday in the beginning of the 19th century, which was a time that Kardec grew up, right? So from the 22 to when he was about, 50 years old, when he began having contact with the Spiritist doctrine. So it's directly like very prevalent at that time when he was writing there, and it's the exact juxtaposition or contraposition to the Spiritist philosophy, right? So it's a good example to to confront and to say this is the exact opposite. And it was pretty much like people were going from the abuses of the Inquisition and the church led to the extreme opposite of believing that there was nothing, and then trying to come to a middle ground and a rational faith, right?
Yes, and that's what he's doing here, right? He's laying that foundation to bring home the point that you're making, contrasting, the benefits of spiritism, but because you can't judge a material by its content alone, right? He's judging a doctrine by the effects of its belief, right? And that's why I highlighted this in yellow because again, meaning that the title is doctrine. The first one that he is analyzing and is nihilism, right? And he's saying insensitive and antisocial doctrine, and he uses this one as an example, saying that it dissolves, the bonds of solidarity and fraternity because pretty much is every man out for himself, right? There is no benefit in being lovable and in helping one's neighbor. And when we talk about even the result of nihilism, right, which is materialism and selfishness, um, and on an individual basis, right? Because first he gives the example. What if nowadays, if we learn that okay, this pandemic, it's gonna end the world, and in 6 months, everything is going to be destroyed, right? Which is not the case. We know it's temporary. It's an exaggeration here. But if that was the case, then this is what he's describing right here. It'd be total chaos, right? Who would uh, stay in their jobs? Who would keep studying for an exam? Who would refrain, from seeking their heart's desires? Uh, who with disbelief and nihilism would adopt such a conduct, right? Nobody. He says, of course not, right? And he's saying that's what nihilism provokes in an individual basis. But we don't see that movement as a society. Why? And he gives two reasons, right? First, in the first place, it says because even though we like to believe there are a lot of people who negate the existence of anything, that's not the case. Those folks have more doubts than conviction, right? So we don't have hardcore non-believers. They're more not satisfied with what religion have, or what religion has offered them up to this point, right? So that's first. It's not really true disbelief, and then in second place, we don't see this chaos, because again, those folks who do believe in nothing and they're out for themselves, they are by far in the minority, right? We have a lot of people who are either religious, if not religious, they're agnostic, right? And I heard a lecture I was watching online the other day, citing a statistics that I found interesting. I don't know if you guys knew that, but the Brazil, which most of us in the center were from, is the second country with people who have the most faith, out of all the nations. And the first one I think was Guatemala. Right, that's interesting, right? And again, that's combined, all different faiths. But again, he's trying to highlight the benefits of faith here. Okay. Does anybody have anything to share, guys? I'm gonna start sharing stories.
I don't have anything to share. I have a question.
Mhm.
I'm trying to understand what is the difference between nihilism and materialism. I think nihilism is more, it's a completely disbelief for everything. And materialism is the belief that everything is material, and when the life ends, everything ends. Is that right?
Yes, those two statements are right, but I would say that nihilism is pretty much a philosophical doctrine that says that life is meaningless. There is no purpose to life, right? And if one believes that, one is more prone to become materialistic, okay? Because there are people who are materialistic, but they still believe there is an afterlife, right? They're selfish, but they still believe there's something more to it. So they're not quite the same thing, but materialistic people are those that value material things over spiritual ones, right? If that makes any sense. Does
Okay,
that make
thank
yeah?
you.
So, and then just so we're not just reading, right? So, and I'm going to try
I
to bring
just
as
want to
many.
mention,
Go ahead.
to add to that Kardec at the introduction of the Spirit's book, when he talks about materialism, he actually classifies as those that actually do not believe in any spirituality at all, right? So those that are materialistic. So um,
So in that sense, will be the same thing. That's why I'm having a hard time to understand.
I see your point. I see your point.
Yeah,
Yeah. Go
but
ahead. Go ahead.
I think, yeah, but I think to what you said first, from I'm not I a lot into the philosophical definitions of this, but the way I understand is materialism deals with that we are made on life is composed only matter is a product of life is a product of matter, right? There's nothing like when matter dissolves, life's it's done. There's nothing after that. While nihilism
like
goes beyond and it says there's no sense to life at all. There's no meaning. There's no it's a kind of skepticism, and that's how I understand it. But they'll be very close, and one leads to the other undoubtedly. Like if you're nihilistic,
yeah,
certainly you have to be materialistic, right?
Mhm.
for a materialistic person, they might believe that everything ends when matter ends, right? But um, there may see a meaning, a purpose.
Exactly.
Life is to conquer more materialistic things, for instance. And in the nihilist, they don't see meaning at all for life,
Exactly.
right?
And a materialistic person may only see the sense of working for society, right? You can have a materialistic person that, although they don't believe that they're gonna keep living after the death of the physical body, but they may believe institutions that, education and progress, and that will give some sort of purpose, right?
Right. For coming to the rescue. But I think that's pretty much a good distinction then. If we were to assume that materialists, if we've made that difference, that materialists can still have a purpose in life, and versus, someone who is a nihilist, just the belief that life is, without meaning, right? And then what I was going to say before, yes, Aisha Valente saying, I think having a purpose is reassuring. I agree with you, Aisha. And just materialistic, the way I responded was by the mere definition of materialism. And in the Spirit book, what you're saying, Danny, too, which it was not in my mind at all, he was probably reviewing the word in the context of a doctrine, right? The doctrine of materialism. But needless to say, they're not beliefs that lead to healthy behavior, right? And then that was what I was the story I was going to bring. I don't know if you guys watched that movie, Bezerra, Dr. Bezerra de Menezes, but essentially he was a spiritist doctor who lived in Brazil, and he's very dear to the Spiritist movement. He's considered, a benefactor of the Spiritist movement, considered the Brazilian Kardec. But essentially, during his time, somebody came to him, a materialistic person, saying, "Oh, why, do you believe in spirituality?" Essentially, this is, make believe stories for folks who don't have the strength to face life as it is, right? And then after the guy went on a whole philosophical dissertation of why, faith did not make sense, he got up and he said, "No, the day you bring to me, a mother who was consoled after having lost a kid by materialism, a father who is no longer desperate after losing a kid, someone who's sick who now has hope due to materialism, then we can have a conversation, right?" And that was the end of the discussion because they're not equivalent, right? The results of material of not believing in anything and having faith are completely different. But and I want to be careful here too. We're going to keep reading, and then I want to bring another story. We are not saying that folks who are atheist or agnostic, they're inferior to those who believe, right? Because believe is just that. Believe is not a definition of character. It may be a clue, but what defines character is conduct, right? But we're going to discuss that in a little bit. Anything else, guys? And that's why it's good. We're going together. Any more comments before I keep reading? All right. So, okay, let's give Beth a break. Does anybody, Georgia, would you care to pick up? Georgia might have stepped out.
Okay, so
Oh, go ahead, Georgia.
you want me to read?
Yes. So he said that absolute disbelief were to gain the majority, society would devolve into chaos. That is what propagating the doctrine of nihilism would lead to. Okay. And then now there's a footnote here, and it's going to just illustrate his point. Can you read the footnote?
Yeah. An 18-year-old boy with heart disease was declared incurable. Medical science has told him you could die within 8 days or 2 years, no more than that. Knowing this, the boy soon gave up his studies and began indulging in excesses of every kind. When he was warned about the dangers of such an irresponsible life, he responded, "What does it matter? If I have no more than 2 years to live, why should I hold back? I want to enjoy what little time I have left and have fun until the end." Such is the logical consequence of nihilism. However, if this boy had been a spiritist, he would have said, "Death will destroy only my body, which I leave behind as a worn out object, but my spirit will live forever." In a future life, I will be what I might have been in this one. I will lose nothing of what I have acquired in this one with respect to moral and intellectual qualities, because it represents a gain for my evolution. Every imperfection that I will have freed myself from will be one more step towards happiness. My happiness or unhappiness depends on the use or misuse I have made of my present life. Therefore, it is my best interest to take advantage of the little time I have remaining and avoid everything that could diminish my strength. Which of these two doctrines is preferable?
Right. Any comments? So it's pretty much what we were talking about just now, right? There's this one time a lady was studying psychologist about to graduate, and she was in her 70s. And Divaldo asked her, "Why are you going to school? You're not going to have a lot of time to practice, your use your degree." And she said, "Well, not in this lifetime, but in the next, I will for sure," right? So it changes the view, right? Death is not the end of things, but it's a continuation. It's a different version of life, right? Go ahead, Georgia. Let's pick up from however. Keep reading a whole page there. So if you want to pick up from however.
However, in spite of the possible consequences, once nihilism were proven to be true, we would have to accept it, and neither contrary theories nor the idea of the ills resulting from it could eliminate it. And we must concede that skepticism, doubt, and indifference gain ground every day, despite religion's best efforts. That is certain. If religion has shown itself to be powerless in overcoming disbelief, it is because religion lacks something in the struggle in such a way that if it were condemned to remaining inactive, it would disappear at some point. What religion lacks in the age of positivism, in which comprehension is sought instead of belief, is undoubtedly the sanction of its doctrines by demonstrable facts, as well as the agreement of its doctrines with the physical data of science. If a doctrine says something is white, while the facts prove that it is black, one must choose between the evidence and blind faith. 4. It is under such circumstances that Spiritism has erected a barrier to the invasion of disbelief, not only because of its reasonableness and because of its perspective of the dangers which disbelief poses, but because of physical incidents that have rendered the soul in the future life both visible and tangible. We are all free to choose our beliefs. We can believe in something or we can believe in nothing. But persons who seek to make the denial of the future prevail in their minds, in the minds of the masses, especially in the minds of the youth, by supporting themselves on the authority of their own knowledge and the loftiness of their position, sow the seeds of trouble and dissolution in society, thereby incurring a grave responsibility.
Okay, period. All right. He's talking about the man of intellect, right? The intellectual man. It's also card deck, or I should say, in another book, in the Gospel according to Spiritism, Kardec will put a message in there called "The Mission of the Intelligent Man on Earth," and he's saying that pretty much he has a very big responsibility in educating the masses, right? And if that man uses his status, his position to disseminate materialistic views, right? He's incurring a grave debt, right? And again, it's reiterating what was in the gospel. Any comments about this, Don? Here's this word again, positivism. Remember, we just learned that as well. But any comments in general about what we just read, guys?
I have a comment. I find it very interesting if we go back to item 3, when he talks about this just juxtaposition between facts and what is the word that he says?
Evidence and blind faith or positivism.
Yeah, why if a doctrine says something is white, why the facts prove that it's black? One must choose between the evidence and blind faith. How current is this? We have been watching this every day. That man still is struggling with this to differentiate and to be able to actually see and understand what is fact and what is just blind faith. I find this so interesting, and this book's like over 100 years old. I find that very, very interesting.
Right. And that's why there is also the idea, right? When we learn that unshakable faith is that which can face reason in all epoch or all eras, right? All different periods of humanity, right? And that's why he brought earlier here this notion, right? If religion has been shown to be like ineffective, it's because it's lacking something, and that something is reason, right? Is evidence, is something that positivism offers, right? And he's talking about reason, pretty much the notion of understanding something through data, and so doctrine does not have any logical explanation, especially for tenets of heaven and hell, and the reasons why we suffer, and it doesn't speak to reason. Then it's no surprise that folks will negate it altogether, right?
Yeah.
It's also amazing, like the time the, the the codification came about, right? We're just out of the Inquisition period there, right? Just coming out of it, and it's all the persecutions, right? And where all the opposite of learning Spiritism here, be invited to have a reasoned faith, right? A rational faith.
Yes, so that's a great point, Danny, because real quickly, right? How are we supposed to follow, a God that's supposed to be merciful and all loving if his representatives here on earth are torturing, are persecuting, are killing, are stealing, right? And again, we're not talking about a religion, but we're talking about religious folks who, did not practice their religion, right, according to what they preached. Go ahead, Lena.
Oh yeah, I was just going to mention when you're talking about how Kardec is constructing this and comparing the mentioning the positivism. It's actually very interesting and it's very clear, especially in the Spirit's book, how he applies those concepts of the positivism very closely to the logical positivism, right? Of deduction and exclusion. Like he doesn't say you have to believe this because of that, and he says, if this is true, based on this principle, then you can deduce that this is the consequence. It's always if this, then that, if this, then that, if this, and that's the basis of the logical positivism. And he constructs the whole Spirit's book based on that. If you look at the tenets of Spiritism, they're all a derivation of there's a God. And if God has these properties, then all of those laws, there are logical consequences of that, as opposed to the believe because I'm telling you, because I had a revelation and that's the truth, right? So that's the linkage where he brings out the rational faith. The rational part is this: you can get to that if you follow a logical path, right? You don't have to believe blindly.
Okay, anybody else?
I agree with that. Just having when I was reading the Spirit's book, when they explained the Genesis, and he said that, no, it was, I'm not going to remember exactly, but talking about God created the earth in 7 days, and that's how it is in the Bible, but that doesn't make sense. But in Spiritism, it's like each day is a million years, and then that's how evolution created it. So for me, then I could wrap my mind around it. Like does that make sense?
Yeah.
Thanks, Beth. Anybody else? You see how the works are interconnected? How we keep referring to the Spirit's book, and according to Spiritism. I think I'm just reading here. There are many concepts that science might not be able to prove yet. Over history, we observe blind faith from the past might be proven later, then be accepted logically by society. That's a good point, right? We can't prove right now through. There are a lot of, I think, religion offers in aspects, right? A revelation, right? So it can be ahead of science, right? Not necessarily having to uh, conflict with science, okay? But I agree with what Aisha is saying. And she put blind faith in quotes, meaning that it's not really blind, if you guys refer to the comment. But obviously, faith needs to be reason. But I would also play the devil's advocate and say that sometimes science comes to disprove what some religious beliefs affirm, right? Especially like with Earth being the center of the universe, right, and so on and so forth. So it's an argument of both sides, right? Go ahead.
To that point, Pablo, science often comes to disprove what science has just said, right? So we keep seeing all the times. I mean, what we thought about one scientific aspects 100 years ago is very different than we understand today, and that's the case that you can also consider science as a revelation, right? Because to reveal is to make something that is unknown to make it to be known, and studying the laws of nature, you are making science is making revelations all the time, but just of a different fields,
Nature,
right?
right?
So religion tends to do like reasonable faith, and particularly religions that are based on empirical facts, like the mediumistic facts, right? They make revelation of more of a moral nature.
Right, right. And there are different sorts of sciences too, right? Different fields, and oftentimes, we'll see Kardec saying, just as the microscope came to, reveal the world of the, the micro, right? The invisible to the eye world, right? The mediums or mediumship unveil the spiritual world, right? And he draws those parallels, right? And adopts the scientific method and compiling, like you're saying earlier, the whole, argument, right, for the doctrine. But okay, let's keep moving here. I want to cover some more ground. Go. Can you keep reading for us, Georgia? Oh, and again, let's see. Yeah, we stopped at 5, right? So for while we're reading, guys, what I highlighted yellow here is a different doctrine, right? So what doctrines have we covered so far, or has Kardec mentioned so far?
Nihilism, positivism.
Yeah, pretty much nihilism, right? We had a discussion about materialism.
Yeah.
So now this is another one that's coming up in number 5. Go ahead.
There is another doctrine that is defended from the accusations of materialism because it accepts the existence of an intelligent principle outside of matter. It is the doctrine of absorption into the universal whole. According to the doctrine, upon being born, each individual assimilates a portion of the universal whole. This portion comprises his or her soul and provides him or her with life, intelligence, and feeling. At death, this soul returns to the common center and loses itself in the infinite like a drop of water in the ocean. The doctrine is undeniably a step above pure materialism, since it does believe in something at least, whereas the other believes in nothing at all. However, the results are exactly the same for both. Whether souls are immersed into nothingness or into a common reservoir, it amounts to the same thing. In the first case, where they are annihilated, or in the second, where they lose their individuality, it is as if they never really existed. Relationships cannot help but be broken forever. What is essential is the preservation of the self. Without the self, what does it matter?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. Without the self, what does it matter if the soul exists or not? People will perceive that the future is always nil and that the present life is the only thing that interests and concerns them. From the moral consequence standpoint, this doctrine is as unhealthy and hopeless and excites as much selfishness as does the materialism per se.
Okay. So what does this doctrine, can somebody just sum up real quick what we just read? So he calls this doctrine the doctrine of absorption into the universal whole. And that kind of reminds us of a topic in the first part of the Spirit's book too, right?
Mhm.
Which is not the same. He's going to discuss that, but can anybody summarize? Or have a comment about this? I see Maria Kaufman.
The difference between that and pantheism.
Ah, okay. What's go ahead.
I'm trying to remember. I actually
Pantheism is like when you have a whole lot of different gods, right? But in this one doesn't say.
Right.
Is
No,
that correct?
no.
So
So pantheism, and he's going to explain in a little bit, but just so we can review what this is, right? So essentially, he's saying that the doctrine of absorption into the universal whole, saying that we come from a complete universe, a universal whole, where we each originate from, right? And after we die, we go back to that whole, okay?
yeah,
And
that I understood. But what is pantheism then? In my mind,
This,
go ahead, go ahead.
this is pantheism when you don't have an individuality. Because when you die as a spiritist, you are a spirit that's still the same,
Keeps the same, it keeps the
the,
constant.
the identity.
but that's
And
how
the
so go
yeah,
ahead.
and the pantheism, you go back to a whole universe.
Right, but the difference here is what you're trying to say is this is one doctrine of going back to a whole and then you lose yourself. But pantheism, Fernanda, is pretty much the idea that God himself is not a separate entity from its creation or the universe. That all of the planets, all of us, all of material things, all of it together is what God is. You know that.
It's
Oh,
not
I
like
see.
it's
So
not
you
Okay.
get the
like
difference.
God made the stuff as a creator.
Mhm.
It's
So
like God is in the creation.
right.
Got it.
Right, the
Got it.
creation
Okay.
is God. And you see how this is different? It has nothing to do with God. It's just saying that we come from a hole and we'll go back to a hole and we lose self in the process, right?
Like a cosmic energy, something like that.
The idea that we don't preserve ourselves. We don't,
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't have individuality.
Right,
Individ-
right, Anna.
right? We are entire whole in God.
Right. And pantheism is different because we believe that creation is God. But Danny, that's good that you're saying that, like, oh, I forgot. And that's why it's so it's a good opportunity, especially for me too, where like you mentioned, oh, materialism in the introduction of the Spirits book, Kardec says. So it's good for us to learn together because we're learning from each other here. So that's what
Okay,
we're
so go
glad to
ahead
have
and
you guys.
explain to me again what is the difference between the universal whole and pantheism.
The idea that God, that planets, that the creation is God, right? that God is not a separate being, that we are God altogether combined, right? That's in
Okay.
the first part of the Spirit's book. And then this doctrine that he's saying is not mentioning God at all. It's saying that it's the belief that we come from a whole, and then when we die, we go back to a whole. And then to make that easier for us to understand, he's talking about a drop of water. It's like we come from a whole, the whole being the ocean. So we're each a drop of water. And then after we die, we go back to that hole. We go back to the ocean. And when the drop hits the water, it loses its individuality, right?
I got it. So
You got it?
what I understood is that in the pantheism doctrine, there is a sense of God, which isn't existent in this doctrine of whole something.
Right. But what is the definition of pantheism, Fernanda?
So everything is God, the entire creation. There is no difference
Right.
between creator and creation. The entire thing is God.
Include. Correct. Perfect.
Okay.
Got it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right. Let's keep going here. Let's cover some more.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. 6. Furthermore, one can make this objection. All the drops of water drawn from the ocean resemble each other and possess identical properties as part of the same whole. But why then do souls taken from the great ocean of universal intelligence resemble each other so little? Why does genius live alongside stupidity and the most sublime virtues alongside the most ignoble vices? Why are goodness, kindness, and forbearance found right alongside malice, cruelty, and barbarity? How can parts of the same homogeneous whole be so different from one another? Might it be said that education leads to such differences? If that were the case, where do innate qualities, precocious minds, good and evil instincts, regardless of education, come from? I lost my.
So often.
Oh, okay. And which are so often completely at odds with the environment wherein they have developed. There is no doubt that education modifies the intellectual and moral qualities of the soul, but therein lies another problem. Who provides this education that causes the soul to progress? Could it be other souls who, due to their common origin, could not be any more advanced than the one being educated? Moreover, when the soul re-enters the universal whole from whence it came after having progressed over the course of its life, it takes a more perfected member into that whole. This would imply that the whole should be continually deeply modified and improved. So how can it be explained why ignorant and perverse souls incessantly come from it?
Are we following his brilliant argument over here?
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Right. It makes no sense. So first, like instead of saying like, I don't agree with you, you don't have faith, you are inferior to me, saying, okay, let me sit and have a conversation with you. Let's start from your idea, from your view. You're saying that we all come from a whole. We go back to this origin source. But okay, let's say I take that for truth. How can you explain to me that if we progress, if we have geniuses, if we have good people, but we also have bad people, how come all of those good people, all of the qualities, all of the progress that we're making, how come that doesn't affect and make the whole better? How come we still see people who are evil? We still see people who are ignorant, right? Are we following?
There's a question there on the chat, and I don't know, Aisha, if you're being able to unmute yourself. But just if you hover your mouse over the screen, you're gonna see a red button with an icon, and if you click on it, you're gonna be able to, so you can ask a question. In case you want, just if you're not being able to.
Aisha, right? Let's see. Is it what happens to animals when they die? Go back without individuality? Yeah, this is a whole different topic that she's asking. Feel free to unmute your mic too about about individuality, right? That was from the previous comment. Yeah. So we can't say that they lose, they go back into the hole, right? That doesn't, that's also applicable to that notion of the intelligent principle is what we call, right? What animals are, right? But that's a discussion that we can talk about at a different in a different opportunity. But I just wanted to read a couple more paragraphs before we call it, guys. But let's discuss here what he said, Lino, or anybody else. How is he proving the argument or the doctrine of absorption into a whole, which is the second doctrine that he analyzes after nihilism?
Again, he's using the empirical method, right? He's saying that we observe people in different, like if you look at society, you see people in different moral stages. If all those souls come from the same source, how can you explain that? Like it doesn't compute, like
Right.
if you go back to the source and people are improving and you go back and improve the source is constantly improving. Therefore, how can that people still be coming from that ever improving source?
Right.
So it doesn't make
So beautiful, right? Like how he shows that it lacks logic, right? That it
Yeah.
just doesn't make any sense.
And that's, and again, that's something that we take for granted, right? And just sometimes reading or not really appreciating the argument, right? But okay, let's just read this here, and then we're almost done with this part. I actually wanted to finish, but we have literally like two more pages, which obviously I won't rush to. So we have, yeah, we're at page 19. This first chapter ends, and we're gonna finish page 16 today, okay? And then next week we'll finish the chapter 1, and we'll start a very good one that I want to actually bring other examples from the Spiritist.
Next week we're gonna have the
Oh,
mediums
yeah.
book.
Next month, so I'm gonna have a whole month to prepare, guys. So that's
and,
next time we'll read.
and
Go ahead.
that's the response to the discussion, right? On item 7.
Yes, yes, and exactly. So let's go ahead and read. Let's see if I was right in my explanation here. I actually read this before, so I cheated a little bit. Go ahead. Go ahead, Georgia.
Okay.
Is it Maria? Can you hear me? Do you want to read, Maria? Because I haven't heard from you today. Kaufman. I think she's just listening. So go ahead, Georgia, please.
Okay. In this doctrine, the universal source of intelligence that supplies human souls is independent of the divinity. It is not pantheism per se. It differs from pantheism, which considers the universal principle of life and intelligence as comprising the divinity itself. God is help me,
Concomitantly?
yeah, thanks, both spirit and matter.
I mean, at the same time, right? So it's both the spiritual world, the material world, all of creation is God, right? Go ahead.
All beings, all the bodies of nature make up the divinity, of which they are molecules and constitutive elements. God is the composite of all intelligence taken together, and each individual as a part of the whole is God in him or herself. No superior or independent being rules the whole. The universe is an immense republic without a ruler, or rather, it is a place where each individual is a ruler without absolute power. With, sorry.
Yeah. So I'll read. Any comments here, guys?
I think now it's very clear, right? That or the distinction between the previous one. But I really like this last sentence when he says, "The universe is a immense republic without a ruler," because everyone is part of the divinity and a piece of it.
Right.
There's no
Everyone is God, right? So there is no.
Right. There's no one in command, right? There's no one.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So and then again, pretty much, and this is again, this now is the third doctrine, right? In a way, if we want to keep track of what we're learning, right? So nihilism and the absorption of the universal whole, and then he talks about pantheism. And then you know what? Let's just read item 8 and then we'll call it, okay? Go ahead, Georgia.
Innumerable objections may be raised against the pantheistic theory, but the main ones are, since divinity cannot be conceived of apart from infinite perfection, then one must ask, how can a perfect whole be formed of such imperfect parts in need of progress? Since each part is subject to the law of progress, then it follows that God also must progress. And if God continually progresses, God must have been very imperfect at the beginning of time. Additionally, how could an imperfect being formed of such divergent wills and ideas conceive such harmonious laws that are as admirable in unity, wisdom, and foresight as those that govern the universe? If all souls are portions of this divinity, all must have concurred in establishing the laws of nature. Then why is it that they constantly grumble against the very laws that are their own work? A theory cannot be accepted as truth unless it can satisfy reason and account for all the facts that it entails. If it is belied by just one fact, it is because it does not contain the absolute truth.
Great work, Georgia. Thank you. So, comments, my friends. Last 2 minutes before we do the prayer.
Just pointing out again the very clear logic. If this, then that. If this, then that.
Yeah.
If this, all the time. It's like if this, then that.
Right. Exactly. So he's saying now he established what he first gave the definition of what pantheism was and how it can't be, right? We do observe that there is a, you know, there are laws in nature, right? We do observe that there is certain harmony to the natural laws, you know, when we study physics, when we study chemistry, when we study mathematics, right? And so there is an order to things as they are. And if that is the case, then, you know, then the cause of an intelligent creation must be intelligent, right? But I think what he does great here is saying that we cannot conceive divinity from infinite perfection. So God must be perfect, right? And if we're going to start from that premise, then how can something perfect be composed of imperfect parts, right? Because we are imperfect. We see, you know, creation is imperfect, right? And we're going to learn with Lino the attributes of God, right, as well in the first part. And one of them is that he is immutable. He doesn't change, right? And again, which is something that's wrong with the pantheism, because we see that man is constantly changing. We're changing if we're part of God, right? And something that's perfect doesn't need modification, right? And that's how he pretty much defeats, right, that the argument of pantheism. But does anybody have any more comments?
That is beautiful. And I feel like, oh no, it's almost ending. Just get in the book and continue reading it. Wait for another month for us to go back, right? It just feels.
So our mission is this: we have 1 month to read 8 pages. Let's do that. Let's make a commitment, right? 1 month to read 8 pages so that when we come, we can know more or less what's going on. Okay?
Great.
No, I want this every day.
I want to see you guys, especially in isolation. I want to see you guys. But next time we'll meet at 7:30, and then we'll pick up with the mediums book. Correct, Danny?
Yes.
All right. Did you do the initial? Danny, could you do the final prayer? I think Lino did the initial.
Well, I did.
Danny did the initial. I can do the final.
You happen to do it again, but
No, go ahead, Lino, then.
All right. So let's close our eyes and elevate our thoughts. Trying to visualize the image of our Master Jesus, of our brother, of whom we have now a better understanding picture of this being that was created like us and that had evolved so much time long ago and is now closer to absolute perfection. That we all have this path in front of us, and it depends on us to make all the efforts to shorten this journey as much as possible. We know that we have friends on both sides of life that are constantly cheering, helping us along the way. Let us ask for their collaboration, reach out to us and help us in times of difficulty, of stress, of desperation and sadness, on situations like this epidemic, a sudden disease, a life event or something that is just stressful, but also with the understanding that there's life after this material life, that nothing happens without a reason. And if God is there, if He exists and is God, He's supremely just and fair. So all the things that happen to us are also just and fair. And with that thought of consolation, let's try to calm our anxieties and our pains and put some more reason in our faith so that we can use it as strength to go through our everyday life. So we thank once again the spiritual mentors of the Spirit Society of Chicago for the opportunity to be here together to begin this new study, and that they may support us in our efforts, that we can maintain and continue this study group that is so important for our own development. Thank you so much. So be it.
Thank you, Lino.